After 3 years, I've finally come to the conclusion that Tenet is not good. I spent too many rewatches trying to find that missing piece in order to see the masterpiece under the surface, but I never found that. I was convinced that because it was a Nolan movie, paying attention to every detail like I did for Inception would pay off, and that the more times I see it, the more it will make sense, but that wasn't true. Digging deeper, paying attention, thinking of theories, none of it is worth it because this isn't Inception. It's not even a story. Tenet is just an idea with nothing surrounding it. It's a movie just for the sake of making a cinematic experience with a cool idea of objects moving backwards in time, but nothing actually happened. I love confusing films that make you think. Memento, The Prestige, and Inception all force you to pay attention the whole time to understand anything by the end, which make for some of the best experiences of all time. But Tenet feels like the anti-Nolan movie, because it's confusing for no reason. Trying to understand a story is futile because there's nothing to understand. These characters aren't people, and this story is nonsense. It's not a creative choice to serve this wacky time concept better, it's actually just lazy writing. As much as I never thought I'd say this, Tenet is definitely Nolan's worst film to date. Following is a pretty impressive directing debut. That is to say, it's not horrible. It's definitely fine, but not anything to get excited about. You can see the hints of who Nolan is as a director, especially through the non-linear storytelling that he still uses today, but there wasn't as much of a point to that structure in this story. At least I didn't catch it. This is still one of his most adult films, and to me it doesn't work how I think he planned. Overall, Nolan's first film is probably his most forgettable, and I don't think it's worth revisiting to refresh my memory. It is incredibly impressive how much of a step up Memento is from this, which is why it's worth it to see this film once. Only once. Dunkirk is still underwhelming to me no matter how much I try to get into it. Similar to Tenet, none of these characters feel like people, other than maybe Cillian Murphy's character. I understand Nolan was going for the approach that these soldiers could be anyone, and anyone could be these soldiers, but that way of immersing us into the experience just doesn't work for me. I would prefer getting to know at least one or two characters so that there's something to care about. That's something I need to be invested, because as it is, there's not even a distinction between any of these people. They're just props. Nolan's directing is fantastic, the shots are incredible looking, and a lot of scenes build up the tension well, but this film still ends feeling very dull because I have no emotional attachment to anything. I think this film lacks the heart needed to tell the story of Dunkirk effectively. Insomnia can definitely be called the black sheep of Nolan's filmography because it's the only one that he didn't write. His style still shines through, but it stands out as not being as special as the rest of this list. Al Pacino and Robin Williams are both amazing, and the themes of guilt were interesting to explore. I remember it being a cool story that the more the character tried to get out of a mess, the worse it got for him. It's a good film, but like I said, this is not as special or inventive as Nolan's other work. It's not as memorable either. It's definitely a solid film, I like it, but I wouldn't go out of my way to recommend it. Can we move on to the original projects now? I do really enjoy The Dark Knight Rises, but it's definitely the weakest of this Batman trilogy. I think the ending is amazing. It truly feels like Bruce's story is completed, and this trilogy got the conclusion it deserved. I also like Bane as a villain, and the action is some of Nolan's best, but the actual story in here is one of the messier ones. I don't remember Catwoman having an important role. Batman is kinda outside of the picture for far too long, and Miranda Tate was a pointless character who turned out to be the main villain in a really bad plot twist. It's still a Nolan and Christian Bale Batman movie, so it's an entertaining and epic time, but there's just too many weird decisions to put it on the level of its predecessor. Batman Begins symbolizes Christopher Nolan saving comic book films and the character of Batman. With this film, he changed the scene for superheroes for the better and made a gritty, more grounded world of Gotham to be taken seriously. To me, this is the only live-action Batman movie that explores the character in a really intriguing way. It dives deeper into his morals and backstory and what makes him a hero more than any other. That's why this series was special, and it will remain one of the most iconic versions of Batman. I could make complaints about the villains in the film or the mediocre action and some more issues, but the point is, in his fourth film ever, Nolan made one of the most important superhero movies of all time, proving himself as one of the best directors today, and he was just getting started. Oppenheimer is a great addition to Nolan's incredible set of films, and to me it proves once and for all that he can pull off almost anything. This is his first full-on character study, and it really is something to witness. It does a lot more for me as a retelling of a historic event as well, in comparison to Dunkirk, because of the deep dive into the mind of Oppenheimer. Cillian Murphy finally got to play the main role in a Nolan movie, and he delivered a mesmerizing performance that put this to the next level. The scenes showing the horror in his mind after what he brought to the world, and his guilt even as he's being celebrated, it's haunting and disturbing and powerful. This film is a bit of an achievement in film history, and I think it will be remembered well in years to come. For me, why it isn't higher on this list is because the second half of the film is far better than the first. The first hour and a half is necessary and good setup, but not much of it is actually all that interesting until the second half begins. Still a great movie and absolutely did not disappoint. Memento is still an incredible one-of-a-kind film that only Nolan could pull off so well. A movie that is designed to make you feel completely lost may not be everyone's thing, but it's a piece of art. Trying to piece every scene of the film together is exhausting, but it's worth it. Paying attention so that the meaning of that ending is understood is beyond worth it. I guess this film without that ending is just okay, but the way that the beginning at the end reframes everything we saw before is truly masterful. After a whole film of watching Leonard follow crumbs to fulfill his purpose and get revenge, we find out that he's been choosing to lie to himself and forget details for a long time, just to feel like his life has meaning when he forgets the dark truth. This seemingly dark, meaningless movie managed to pull the biggest trick at the last second and comment on how we as humans sometimes want to ignore the truth and believe the lie to feel better. Telling this story in the wrong order was just a stroke of genius, and I have a feeling Memento will stay timeless. At this point, talking about The Dark Knight feels like it's not needed. Trying to explain why it's so awesome is obvious because everyone has explained countless times, and it speaks for itself. And at the same time, trying to prove that it's overrated like I did for years is also a lost cause, because it's simply a great movie. There's no point in trying to say it's not. More focus on Batman, like in the first one, is something I would prefer, but focusing on the two villains in the movie was fantastic, and the story never lets up. From the opening shot, tension is created, and there's never a wasted moment. Almost everyone calls this one of the greatest comic book films of all time, and while I may not totally agree, I can't argue with it. It's a gripping and thought-provoking journey that will never lose its effect. Every rewatch of Inception still feels like the first time experiencing movie magic like this. It's one of the first movies to show me something beyond Marvel and Star Wars, and it blew my mind. It still does. It's the film that Nolan will be remembered for the most, along with his Batman films, and for good reason. This feels like the project he was always destined to make, because only he could make it. Only he could execute these insane concepts in a way that makes sense inside of this world. The concept of multiple levels of dreams, time flowing differently on each level, and the theme of not knowing what's reality once you've woken up. Only Nolan could have the vision to put all of this into the world. It is endlessly fascinating to think about the ideas and questions presented in the film. And every time that ending hits, I think it's just a spinning top that wobbles. It's not that crazy. But that scene always makes me happy. It's too perfect. I have to say the emotional core of this film and Cobb's motivations maybe seem absent for a little too long, so it's not on the very top of this list, but it's still a 10 out of 10 favorite for me. Interstellar is a special film. It's humanity versus the power of nature, and there's no real villain to face other than the unknown out in the universe, which is awesome. Throughout this huge experience, you can constantly feel how helpless humans are against the forces of time and space. This film shows that better than any other that is tried. It's the largest scale sci-fi adventure I think I've ever seen, and it proves that anything is possible through movies. It's incredible that it exists for the sheer epic scale of the story alone, but to me, it is also Nolan's most emotionally powerful film. Some of his best characters are Cooper and Murph, who really help this story come to life so much better. As the harsh nature of the universe pulls them away the whole time, their bond stays strong and they are able to save the world together. This film has all of Nolan's incredible cinematic filmmaking, some of his wild time-bending ideas coming to life, and it is also his best character work and emotional storytelling. It's an overwhelming, powerful experience and one of the best movies I've ever seen. And it's number 2 on this list. There's something about The Prestige that I can't quite explain, but it's just the coolest film I've ever seen. The progression of this story is so fascinating, I think because maybe it doesn't use the traditional 3-act structure of a film, which is ironic because of the tricks the characters perform. The Prestige has a different feel to it. It's consistently escalating the rivalry and the stakes for the characters involved. Each scene adds more intrigue into finding out what's really going on under the surface of this magician rivalry. By the end, the theme connecting it all becomes clear: sacrifice. Both Borden and Angier were so sick and caught up in performing a perfect magic trick that they destroyed the rest of their lives, their relationships, and especially themselves. Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, and Christopher Nolan is a dream team, and when they teamed up for this film, I believe they made a perfect film. The twists revealing what each character was really doing the whole time are still some of the most mind-blowing moments in cinema history, and it's gotta be my favorite Nolan film. I understand no one else having this at number 1, after all I gave 3 of these movies 10 out of 10, but for me, The Prestige is the best.